Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome into the show. Yet another episode of Crushing Fantasy Football. I am Bryce Lockridge, your host of the show. It is June 1st, guys, so we are 3 months away, basically, from football season. I know you guys are excited. It's coming fast, so I'm going to be starting my player comps this month, and I'm basically going to be talking about players that are really close in ADP value, pretty much like going right next to each other, and who I think you should be taking in the majority of your drafts over the other. So I'm going to be making a case for both players, but talking about who I'm slightly leaning towards. Anyways, guys, before I get into today's video, the Patreon League already has 4 out of the 10 slots filled, so it's filling up quick. If you want to get in, simply join the Patreon. I'm going to put the link in the comments below. That'll also get you my 2025 ranking, so it's a pretty cool thing. We're going to be doing a $100 buy-in, $800 for first, so some pretty good money on that you can win for first place there. So. All right, guys, I'm going to be starting right here with my first player that I'm compared to the other. We're comparing Brian Thomas to Nico Collins because they're pretty much going right next to each other in the draft. So I'm going to start by talking about Brian Thomas. So if you look at him last year, 133 targets. So he was 14th in the NFL in overall target accumulation. You typically see players that are outside of the top 10 in targets rarely finish in the top 7 or 8 in fantasy value and as far as, overall fantasy finish on the season. But Brian Thomas had so many yards after the catch. This is the reason for this. The dude had 562 yards after the catch. If you have yards after the catch numbers like that, it can allow you to see a little bit less targets and still dominate. But what we did start to notice is that later in the season, he started to have a lot more games with double-digit targets. This is a very good sign. It leads me to believe that he's going to see a lot of double-digit target games this next season, even though they added Travis Hunter. I think that the offense is going to be really efficient and give him plenty of touchdown upside. So I think that even if he loses maybe 1 target per game on average from what he was seeing late in the year last year, because the addition of Travis Hunter, I think the overall efficiency of the offense will make up for this. I think he is a very good pick at the end of the first round. You look at him last season, 2.55 yards per route run. I like players coming off seasons where they were top 10 in the league in yards per route run. This is typically a very good sign. It means that every time they run a route, they're doing something good for their offense. This is a sign of great wide receivers. Great wide receivers sustain great yards per route run efficiency metrics from a season-to-season standpoint. This dude was also 28th, or he was 5th in the league in deep targets with 28 deep targets last season. So not only are they feeding this guy, they're throwing him the ball downfield. So he's getting an opportunity at a lot of air yards and getting to make big catches before even having to run after the catch. And we all know what kind of run after the catch abilities he has. The dude's pretty awesome. I really like him going at the end of round 1. I think he has an outside shot of finishing as the wide receiver 1 in fantasy. I mean, the physical abilities are there. The role in the offense is there. I'd say there's about a 5 to 8, maybe a 5 to 7% chance of him finishing as the wide receiver 1. So the chance is definitely there. Next player on my list is going to be Nico Collins. Now, you look at Nico Collins, and in comparing him to Brian Thomas, the yards per route run numbers were actually better. This dude, Nico Collins, 2.92 yards per route run last season. Granted, he played less games, but the fantasy points per game were there. I mean, this is the second season in a row where Nico Collins has finished top 8 in the league in fantasy points per game. To display how hard this is, Brian Thomas, as good as his season was last year, was 11th in fantasy points per game, even despite finishing as the number 4 overall receiver. The fantasy points per game numbers, he was 11th in the league. And if you look at Nico Collins, the dude's just a dominant physical specimen. He's pretty much like the most dominant physical specimen in the league at the wide receiver position, standing at 6'4", running a 4.5. I mean, really pretty similar athletic profile to Brian Thomas. Brian Thomas might be even a little more athletic. He's definitely faster, but Nico Collins with the good speed, the massive 6'4" size, good frame, well-built dude. This dude is like a taller A.J. Brown, basically. He really is. I mean, this dude is the ultimate athletic specimen, and it shows in his win rate versus man coverage. I mean, last year he had the number 1 target rate versus man coverage with a 40.7% target rate and a 42.7% win rate versus man, which was 4th in the league. So this dude wins against man coverage all the time. It's pretty much impossible to cover this dude. He's an absolutely dominant athletic specimen who really took over as an awesome fantasy wide receiver ever since C.J. Stroud became the quarterback in Houston. And think about this. C.J. Stroud just had a bad season, and Nico Collins was still absolutely dominant. top 10 in fantasy, top 8 in fantasy points per game. Absolutely dominant with a bad CJ Stroud season and missing 5 games. What does this tell you about what's going to happen if CJ Stroud bounces back? It was also a crowded wide receiver room for the Texans this past year. I mean, we had the addition of Stephon Diggs. We had a healthy Tank Dell to start the season. Now we got none of that. All right. The best wide receiver on the team now, the second best wide receiver going into the year, at least on the depth chart, is Christian Kirk. Right. Obviously, we added some guys in the draft, Jaden Higgins. So, we've added wide receiver depth in the draft, but he had to compete with Stephon Diggs and Tank Dell last year for targets, and he was still dominating the target share, still dominating the efficiency numbers. He was the clear-cut wide receiver one in the offense. Now he has no competition for targets. If we see any sort of positive regression for C.J. Stroud, Nico Collins is going to go absolutely ballistic, and I could seriously see this guy being the wide receiver one in fantasy. I certainly think it could happen, and he's going pretty much consensus at the 1-2 turn. This dude's a massive steal, a great value. And you can probably see where I'm going with this. I do favor Nico Collins a little bit over Brian Thomas, although it is close. I love both players. They're two of the most dominant physical specimens, if not the two most dominant physical specimens in the league at the wide receiver position. Nico Collins, I just can't, I can't not draft him when he posted top 3 season last year in yards per route run and was top 8 in fantasy points per game for a second season in a row. And then the win rate versus man coverage was just absolutely one of the most impressive things I've ever seen. He's been dominant in that statistic 2 seasons in a row. Now you figure C.J. Stroud almost has to regress positively based on what you saw last year, and there's no competition for targets in Houston. This guy's going to go absolutely nuts. So I'm favoring Nico Collins over Brian Thomas by a decent margin this year, but I still love Brian Thomas going at the end of round 1. I love both players. That's why I wanted to compare him in this video. But I am leaning Nico Collins when you're making this decision in your drafts. So if you get to the point in your draft where you're deciding between Nico Collins and Brian Thomas, I'm going with Nico.